everybody. Well, let's talk a little bit about viruses and what viruses are. In this unit for fourth period, I know that this is already in your packet and it's the next thing after taxonomy. However, also you'll notice in the packet pickup, which is going to be on April 9th, it talks about infectious disease, viruses, bacteria, what pathogens are, and our immune system. So this is where fourth period and first period are actually going to collide. Though you've done different things up to this point, this is something that you actually are going to do at the same time. So for first period, you will actually begin this unit on Monday the 20th. So this will be after spring break. However, for fourth period, these are the lecture notes that we will talk about in the call tomorrow. So without further ado, let's talk viruses. Okay, so viruses, we know, you hear, COVID and coronavirus, and we hear, oh, we can't do anything about it, it's just a virus. Viruses can help us feel a little vulnerable, a little out of control, because it's not something that many times we can take just an antibiotic for and think that we can fix it. And so we find that antibiotics are not effective for viruses. So we rely on our immune system to fight that virus. So we're going to talk about that, but exactly what is a virus? So we have this note sheet that's in this packet for the fourth period class. And so if you'll turn to this sheet, and to be very honest, I don't believe it's in the packet for first period. It's not a big deal. You just take the notes in your notebook. Okay, so let's look at the top. What are viruses, and why are they not considered living things? Okay, so viruses. I'll turn this a little bit so you can see. Okay, so viruses, I was told, are kind of biological particles that rely on a host cell to reproduce. For metabolism. And for this, it would be more like just part of that whole idea that it doesn't really need energy, but to be able to copy its DNA and in turn make copies of itself. Okay. They are, well, they have either DNA or RNA. Okay, not both. So let's kind of review. So viruses are biological particles that rely on a host cell to reproduce for its metabolism, and it has either DNA or RNA. So it does have genetic material. What you'll notice is it does not have cells. Okay, no cells at all. Well, if we remember from the very second day of class, we talked about what are those characteristics of life? What do all living things have in common? And there were 10 of those things. Cells was one of them. It's the very first one at the top of the list. No cells at all. DNA / genetic material, that was a requirement for it to be a living thing. But all living things have DNA and RNA, because you know the RNA is needed to make the protein. Well, it has either DNA or RNA, not both. A second violation of what it means to be alive. Reproduction is also a requirement for a living thing to be able to make more of itself. There's a third violation of that list. It cannot independently reproduce. So it relies on a host cell, and that host cell is specific to that virus. So we talk about the coronavirus. Coronavirus is specific to this respiratory system, to the cells of the respiratory system. And so you, likewise, you couldn't get coronavirus of the white blood cells or coronavirus of the liver cells because that's the wrong host cell type. So they're host cell specific. So what do they look like? Viruses are pretty interesting as far as the different shapes. And so when we look at them, they some look extremely complex. And when you look at a coronavirus, you see all of these little knobby things on the outside of it when you see the different pictures of them. And each knobby thing is part of that protein coat. Ironically, a coronavirus, corona is like a crown. And so when you look at the coronavirus, the little knobby things on the outside of it kind of look like crowns. So that's one reason it kind of has its name. But so let's look at the structure of a typical virus. Now, what I have here drawn is actually a virus that invades bacterial cells, and it's called a bacteriophage. So even germs can get germs. So that's what I'm going to actually draw and show you the parts of it. But not all viruses look like that. That's just a particular type. So this is a bacteriophage. That's an R. So this is an example of a virus. And okay. And it can look a little bit more complex here and all that, but that's good enough. All right, and then we're going to put a little squiggly thing in there. So this outside part of this virus, these are like little tail fibers it uses to dock on to the host cell. So here will be the host cell. And this outside part is called the protein coat, which is called the capsid. Okay. Inside that capsid, and this is inside, this will be true too. We know the coronavirus has these funky little knobby protein little docking station things that it connects with the host cell with. This happens to dock here onto the bacterial host cell with these little fibers. But they all have this internal genetic material. And it's either DNA or RNA. Okay? So DNA or RNA and a protein coat. And what determines the actual shape is the DNA itself. Okay? Or the RNA. So it actually encodes for that overall capsid shape that it has. Okay? So we've gone over what they are and why they're not considered alive, the basic parts of a virus, and also we're going to talk about how they're classified. So how do you group them? So we know we have 6 kingdoms of organisms. We have 3 domains that those kingdoms fall under, beneath. And viruses are not a part of that because they're not alive. So we do group them. Viruses are classified by their type of nucleic acid. So they're either DNA viruses or RNA viruses. Okay. All right. So some typical viruses that we have are some DNA viruses, mumps, measles, rubella. There's a vaccine that you get, it's called the MMR vaccine, and that's for these 3. You may think, well, what do I get a vaccine for? And we're going to talk about vaccines and what they're for or what they are used for. But you also have vaccines that are for bacteria, different bacterial diseases. So let's see, what else do we have? Common cold. herpes, genital warts, which is HPV. You get a vaccine for that. Human papillomavirus, which is genital warts. Herpes, there's different types of herpes viruses, even like chickenpox. Polio is another example. Let's see, what else? There's some different gastrointestinal. So when we say we have the stomach flu, it's not really a flu. So there's some different types of, viruses that can affect different parts of your body. These are just a few of those. And I'm trying to think. RNA viruses, influenza, hepatitis. And that's two of those. I want to say Ebola is an RNA virus. I believe rabies may be an RNA virus. I would have to double check that. So here's the thing. Viruses that are DNA viruses are a little bit more stable. And what that means is if their DNA is mutated, and that would give it a different appearance. Remember how when DNA replicates itself, there is a built-in spell check enzyme. It's a DNA polymerase type enzyme, and its job is to spell check and to fix those mutations. So if the mutation is fixed, then that virus will be more stable, and it will stay in the same form. So when a virus does mutate and you get a different kind of version of it, we call them different strains. And so we have more versions of these than we do these. We have lots of different strains of the flu, and that's, we have H1N1, and we have many different types. Every year it seems like there's a new one. We have different types of hepatitis. So RNA does not have that same spell check. So when the RNA mutates, and HIV, and there's different versions of HIV. So when RNA mutates, there's not a spell check to fix that. So you have a different version. So what does that actually mean? When a virus mutates, it's the try to trick, it's all part of natural selection and evolution. So our bodies will have a tendency to fight certain ones better than others, and our body can recognize that virus, then it can fight it off. But when it mutates, our body doesn't recognize that version. So what that would be is maybe, let's say that one version of the flu looks like this. When our body recognizes what it looks like, it then can fight it off. However, if it mutates, it might look like that. Our body can't recognize that. So then we get sick. And then we build up antibodies to try to recognize it in the future. So this is what mutation does. It changes the outside code, the appearance of that virus, and our bodies cannot identify it. Okay? All right, so those are some examples. So there are two words that I want to make sure we understand and how they relate to how viruses reproduce. And viruses don't always make us sick. So you may have a virus, you've contracted a virus, but you never got sick from that virus. You could be a carrier of that virus, you may have it and it's reproducing inside of you, but it's not making you sick and destroying your cells. So a good example of this would be, I got the chicken pox when I was younger, and my body, I went through and I suffered from chicken pox, and my body has built up antibodies for that, but I still have some of that chicken pox virus inside of my body. And so it's just there, and it's called latent. So we have latent viruses. Okay. And this is when a virus is being reproduced by an individual's individual cells, but the cells aren't destroyed. This is what we call the lysogenic reproductive cycle of a virus. Okay, so this lysogenic cycle, to kind of show you how that works. So let's say this is the host cell. And the virus injects its genetic material inside that host cell. Here's the host cell's genetic material in the nucleus. So let's say that this is a cold virus, and this cold virus, you breathe it in, and you know, you don't feel sick, you've contracted it, and this virus, the genetic material has actually injected into your nasopharynx cell, and it comes in here. Well, it's possible that you don't get sick at all. That, number one, maybe your immune system just went on and identified it and killed it, and it's gone. But let's say one snuck by and it injected its genetic material in, and it made its way to the nucleus. Every single time that this cell now reproduces, if it's latent and you're not getting sick, each cell that is made by mitosis will have that viral DNA inside of it. So that's what latent means. It means you don't get sick from the virus, or not get sick yet. So right now, since I had chickenpox, I have some of that viral DNA still there. And it's possible that these latent cells can become, it's called virulent, and they will start reproducing and making more of that virus. And I can then get what's called shingles from that same type of virus that gave me chickenpox when I was younger. This is another example of HIV. You can have unprotected sex. You can contract HIV from that one episode of unprotected sex for that exposure. HIV, then its RNA is injected inside of those white blood cells in your body, and they just reproduce with the HIV RNA inside of them. And you're not sick. You can have HIV 8, 10 years, you have no symptoms, you're asymptomatic. And it's because it's not that the HIV genetic material just went away and the virus was killed. Your body is reproducing those cells. And if your viral load gets high enough, these can now become virulent. And that's when you can start to have symptoms of that virus. And so if it goes latent, there's no disease. Now, let's flip the tables a little bit, talk about when does this cause someone to get sick. So when a virus is pathogenic, this is the virus injects its genetic material to the host cell. Host cell is hijacked. now used as a factory for making more of that virus, more of those protein coats, and more copies of its genetic material. They assemble, and when they assemble, they bust out of that host cell. And so if enough of those cells become hijacked and are taken over by those viruses that you've encountered, they're reproducing, and your white blood cells can't keep up and identify and kill those cells. That's when you get sick. So with the coronavirus or with any type of virus that you can contract, there's an incubation period. So that's why they're saying that you need to social distance, you need to self-quarantine, you need to wait for up to 14 days because usually people show symptoms within that time. Some folks are healthier than others. They're able to fight off that virus. So you may show symptoms in 2 days, you may show symptoms in 3, 4, 7, or even 14. So that's why we have this period of wait to see if, because once enough of that virus kills enough of those cells for you to experience those symptoms, that's when you actually, you see that, because during that time is all they're doing is reproducing. So anyway, so let's see. So use a factor for making more of itself. Host cell is destroyed. So when enough of those, and this is called the lytic cycle. Okay, so that is the second way that they reproduce. Now, what you're going to do actually is there are, for fourth period, there's some questions on the back, and this top question actually shows this cycle. And so you can see how the virus, I'm going to kind of move that in, so the virus injects its genetic material, it makes its way there to the nucleus, that's kind of broken down. You can see all those little genetic material particles and the little protein coats, they're assembled and they bust out to invade more healthy host cells. And so actually both of those questions are showing that process. Okay, all right. So a couple more things to talk about viruses. One is they're extremely tiny. Viruses are much smaller than bacteria. They are incredibly tiny. Also, they evolved after the first life on the planet. So they evolved probably after bacteria because they need a host cell to be able to reproduce. So it doesn't make really sense. How would it reproduce if it had no host cell? So it kind of makes sense that that's how it works. Let's see, what else about viruses? What can we do to try to fight those? Okay, so here are your options. If you've contracted a virus, let's say you go to the doctor or you go to the ER, you go to urgent care and you say, I really feel terrible, these are my symptoms, and they're going to ask you a series of questions, and they may check you and test you for certain things. But if they do not send you home with an antibiotic prescription, most likely you have a virus. So here's what you can do. You can sleep. You can drink lots of fluids. You can take medicine to treat the symptoms, to treat the fever. There may be other complex treatments that you may have to do, such as like with this coronavirus, watching for certain things. If you're labored in your breathing, it might be to do some type of breathing treatment to help treat that symptom, or God forbid, if you're have to be put on a ventilator to help you breathe. The next thing you can do is, if there's one available, is to get a vaccine to prevent yourself from contracting a virus in the first place. And so we know right now there isn't a vaccine for the coronavirus, and that's one that they are, trying to get one developed and then be able to get it approved so they can mass produce one for this virus. And this is true for all viruses. So a vaccine, antibiotics do not work. And the other option is just to eat healthy, to take your vitamins, to get enough sleep so your immune system can be strong enough, because your immune system is your level of defense. That is your built-in genetic defense. And so your immune system has to be able to fight it off. So that's kind of the skinny on the viruses. And until next time, our next video will be for fourth period. We'll be talking about bacteria.